Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. Well, many of you are forecasting that one day soon the South shall rise again. But this time it's going to look a little bit different. There are so many African Americans in the South. That's Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. It's greater than 40% of the population in the South is African American. And with that population, you are bound to have new leadership that can move the South, make it rise again. You know, it's sad to report that in Mississippi, we're last in every major category when the index as it relates to the quality of life. And so something has to change. African Americans are going to be part of this great comeback and this great restoration of our southeastern United States. Now, we're going to do our part right here in Jackson, Mississippi. We're going to broadcast every week, and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, the communication is critically important. The ability to control the narrative, or at least the ability to keep the narrative from being mistold, to stop the misinformation about what goes on in the African community is tremendously important. I listen to talk shows during the day, and to my demise, you know, more talk and more time is spent on the condition of the African American by radio talk hosts than any other subject, as if they have some genuine concern about the well-being and things that benefit the black community. That is not exactly their goal and their mission. So they spend 80% of their time talking about the level of competence in the African American community and the things that we're unable to do, that we're just a bunch of people that are living in crime-infested communities, not having the ability to govern ourselves, not having the ability to control our situation, and not having the ability to build an economy. National talk shows all over this country are talking about the same thing, the condition, the deplorable condition of the urban cities and the African American leadership. And not one call have I ever heard from a European brother that calls in and says, you know, let's don't talk so negative about those that are less fortunate. And they laugh at the idea and the concept of reparations. You know, California has a measure in place today that they are considering giving reparations to African Americans that are descendants of slavery. They think that is deplorable. They think that that is something that ought not happen. And the sad part about that, they have African American mouthpieces that carry the message with greater amount of venom than they can themselves. But we here at We Believe Digital are going to keep the record straight. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we're going to do it in a way that's respectful. We're going to do it in a way that you can understand it, and we're going to do it in a way that we can take some action from these programs. Now, we're being seen on Facebook, on YouTube, on WeBelieveDigital.com. You can find us on those 3 outlets today. We have a presence on Roku TV as well. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and families. We also want you to send us stars. Stars will help us be able to monetize these programs that we're bringing you throughout the day. It will help us hire competent help. It will help us to do the kinds of things that are necessary to improve this presentation. So if you're watching us on Facebook, share it with your friends and families and send us some stars. If you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to subscribe to that channel. Tremendously important. Subscribe to that channel. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, we want you to hit the donate button. We need those resources to help build this platform out, and one day we'll be recognized as a major media outlet that is being able to influence what happens in our communities. And no one wants us to be able to do that looks like us. So what we have to then do is ask the world, since you're watching us in California, and you're watching us over in Germany, you know this program is tremendously important. If you're watching us in Israel, then we ask you to share. We ask that you share this with your friends and families and your network. We ask you to sponsor our programs. It would be tremendously important. We are going to list our sponsors, and this show will be brought to you by the individual sponsors that we get to help us with this program. So it's important. Now, as always, I have my co-host with me, a gentleman that needs no introduction, a renowned author and writer that's recognized all over this country as one of the most influential Americans in the South. My co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, was born on a plantation. And now he sits next to me as Dr. Eldridge Henderson. Not only is he book smart, he's street smart. That makes him a dangerous man. He has the history, he has lived it, but he has the education, he has seen things. He got out of Mississippi early and went abroad. So he studied all over the world. And I'm honored to have him with me here today as my co-host. Dr. Henderson, how have you been?
I've been doing fine, Mr. Socrates. I just want to tell you, I had a hard day. I've been on the road today talking about economic development and politics to people that don't even know what those words mean. And it's very depressing, very depressing.
Well, Doc, it's depressing, but, slavery was depressing. Bondage is depressing. Drug addiction is depressing. Broken homes is depressing. High crime rates is depressing. But all of those things we have to talk about.
That's what I talk about.
And we have to bring light where there's darkness. We have to bring insight where people have been blinded. We are the ones that they depend upon to bring the information and bring a ray of hope and a strategy and a plan that they can use to move forward. I believe you have such a plan.
I have a plan, and that's what I was sharing today, Mr. Socrates. But one of my good, I call them invitees, said, well, Doc, it's not time for that yet. We need to think about this. I'm not saying what he's told me we need to think about, but they have been thinking about it for 200 years and have not decided what they're going to do about this economic plight that black people are in, and what the churches specifically can do to solve it in less than 7 years.
Well, it's tremendously important that we talk about the role of the church. And you have some thoughts about what the church ought to be doing and what the church is not currently doing. You'd like to share?
Well, I would like to do that. Most people know that the black church in America is one of the most significant institutions that ever existed in this country. As far as black people are concerned, this church, the black church, ladies and gentlemen, and Mr. Socrates, is a nation within a nation. The black church has always had everything it needed. Thousands and thousands, millions and millions of members. There are over 700 churches, sir, in Mississippi. The nation. Over 7,000, by the way, according to our research. That's right, over 7,000. And we are not doing very much with the capital we have. And I'm talking about the fixed facilities. They usually meet 2 or 3 times a week. And we also have an opportunity to have some of the best leaders that's highly trained in the world. The other part, our leaders are totally independent in most cases. They don't depend on outside jobs. Therefore, the black church is in a position to change things in America and the world in 7 years if they will organize themselves, put structures together that will include economic, political, social, and religious training at the church as the institutional facility to make this happen.
Now, Doc, the church understands economics because when you were a boy, most of the funerals in this country were held on Sunday.
That's right.
But today, they're held on Saturday.
Exactly.
Why do you think that happened?
Economics.
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 Because the pastors were tired of not being able to get their collection from their members on Sunday because somebody had a funeral.
And the other thing, a lot of pastors get paid on Saturdays to perform those funerals. And sometimes when they were there already doing the regular service on Sunday, if they would get paid, it wouldn't be as much. So they can do a full salary now on Saturdays.
So it was economics that changed the day of funerals.
Of course.
Now you see, ladies and gentlemen, economic drives everything in your life. There is not one thing that goes on in your life that's not tied to the economics of that issue. Here in America and in this democracy and this capitalism system that we live in, it is the absolute one thing that controls everything else that goes on, the economics. It can even change funerals from Sunday to Saturday. Now, Doc, we talked about the economics of the church, and we want the church pastors to know that they have a responsibility and an obligation to be an economic engine in our communities. And so what we need them to do is to understand their responsibility. And that means that if you're going to have an addition, if you're going to build a new church, if you're going to have the building fund, the building improvement fund, which every church has had for 30 years, if you were going to buy choir robes, if you're going to buy vans and cars and tires and gasolines, that you have to spend those dollars inside of your community. We got to get them to understand that is their role, responsibility, and obligation. It ought to be biblical, but now I can't quote a scripture to validate what I'm saying, but you probably can.
Well, I don't have time to go into that scripturally because I know from just experience that if the churches owned all those institutions you've mentioned, that would be another stream of income. There's no reason in this world that the churches shouldn't have a company that manufactures robes, all kind of published information. They should have a transportation system all over the United States where they sell buses, cars, trucks, vans. They ought to have golf course, hotels, and have their meetings in their own hotels instead of buying space in another one where they record all their private information and so forth and use it against them. They should own all of their schools and colleges and universities, and on and on and on. Matter of fact, they ought to have an international component where they work with all the church members throughout the world, because black church members are in America, in the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, Asia, everywhere. There are over 35 million black people that are associated with black churches in America and the world.
Now, Doc, this is nothing strange and nothing new. I believe the blueprint was put in place by the Catholic Church.
Of course.
I believe that they own more land and more businesses than the government did.
They do today. For most small nations, they have their own president. That's the Pope. They have their own money. They have their own nation. They have their own security. They have their own ambassadors. They all have their own army, so to speak. They have their lieutenants all over the world. They call them bishops and priests and all kind of people. And a loyal support group, the individual members that believe almost everything comes out of the Pope's mouth.
Well, we're saying that if we're going to emulate, our black churches need to emulate the strategy that was put in place by the Catholic Church, and let's build an economy in our community. Now, Doc, we're getting ready to go to a commercial break here in a minute, but when we come back, I want to talk about the role of the black government. We got black churches, then we have a black government that's in place, and it has a specific responsibility.
Exactly.
But I don't believe they understand what that is.
They don't. They fight each other every time they get a chance. That needs to stop as of yesterday.
Why do you think it occurs?
Because of jealousy. Jealousy and economic potential. The politicians want the money, the preachers want the money, but I believe both of them ought to get the money and divide it. That's the way you make things happen.
And so we're going to have to give some leadership to our elected officials that are, in the most part, much younger than you and I. We're going to have to educate them on what the role and the meaning of government is. Many of our folk don't understand that commerce created the government, that the government didn't create commerce, the business people created the government. And so why would they do that? They did that so they would have a way of taxing the people and pulling the wealth from the everyday citizen and putting it in a common pool that they could get their hands on.
That's exactly right. But the good news is the very people that started the government were church officials. They worked together. That's the sons and daughters of the bishops, the ministers, the elders, prophets, or whatever you want to call them. And they have always worked together. There's never been a separation of church and state, ladies and gentlemen. Never.
Now explain, I thought there was constitutionally that there was a divide between church and state.
Well, it is in the Constitution, but constitutions are written to take advantage of opportunity, and most people care very little about Constitution when they're going to be hurt economically. They will change it in a minute or just do it because they already have the judges in place that's going to rule in our favor if it's economic.
And I think that's just called a referendum.
Of course.
And they can change the Constitution tomorrow morning if they chose to do so.
Or don't change it, just violate it, and then 6 months later when someone files a suit against them, the judges will take care of it.
They'll fix it for them.
Of course. That's good politics.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. If you want to call into this show, it's 800-492-5186. If you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this with your friends and families. Send us some stars, help support this program. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the program. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, then we want you to hit the donate button and help us keep this program running. Now, we've been broadcast all over the world from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. In over 139 countries we're being seen. So the program and the message is getting out there in a mighty powerful way. And we're getting ready to go to a station break, and we'll be right back after these few messages.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi. In Mississippi, where I always like to say that the air is just a little bit cleaner and the grass is just a little bit greener. One day the South shall rise again, and black folk are going to be a major part of it, not the underclass. We're going to be full first-class citizens enjoying all of the benefits that America has to offer. What do I mean by that? We want decent housing. We want good schools. We want great streets. We want clean water. We want police protection. But most important of all of those things, we want an economy. An economy. We want to share in the economy. The deprivation and the starvation of the economy in African American cities throughout this entire country has just been criminal. We get less than 2% of contracts for goods and services from the state of Mississippi, and we are 40% of the population of this great state. We get less than 12% of contracts for goods and services throughout our entire Hinds County and metropolitan area. We get less than 12%. That's a combination of our schools, our airport authority, our board of supervisors, and our city government. And so we have to do something to change that. And when you don't have an economy, what you have is high poverty. And nobody want to link these things together. Everybody wants to say that the man ought to look in the mirror and see that he is the problem and fix his own problem. Haley Barbour, the ex-governor of the state of Mississippi, said that you ought to just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But Martin Luther King said that how can a bootless man pull himself up by his bootstraps when he don't have no boots? And so we find ourselves in a situation, in an economy that denies us full first-class citizenship. We're going to talk about that. We're going to stay on that until we see some change occurring in this country. I know we can do that. As always, my co-host is the Dr. Eldridge Henderson, individual that's sought after throughout this entire country for speaking engagements. If you have a church, any school organization, your community organization, schools, he is a speaker that you need to get in touch with. He's educated both in the book sense and he's street smart. Born on a plantation and has risen to the height of doctor in this American society. Now, I always said that I agree with Booker T. Washington when he said that it was not the heights that you obtained, but the depths from which you came. Now, if I take that same correlation and apply it to where Henderson came from to where he is today and put him in a starting position that he was a senator, that his daddy was a U.S. senator, and let him start from there, where do you think he would be today from there? Certainly he would have been a candidate for president of these great states of the United States of America because of where he would have started. No different in his intellect, no difference in his abilities, is just where he started from. When you born on a plantation, you starting from a position that's below any position that you might ever imagine. When you grow up every day not seeing any role models other than someone who doesn't look like you, that's sitting atop a big white horse with a whip in his hand, telling you when you can drink water and when you can't. When you start from that position, it's going to be hard. It's hard to break the poverty cycle in America. And when it's been there for generations ever since slavery, we've never been able to break out of poverty because it's difficult. It's hard. Dr. Henderson, you are a man that's sought after. How is it that the African American is supposed to pull himself up by his bootstraps when Dr. King says he doesn't have no boots?
Well, Dr. King was correct. Most blacks don't have any boots. They never had them. It's just only been a small percentage, about 2%. Even during slavery, you had free blacks that had economic power. They were basically connected to the church. They had no political power. Then after slavery, you had about 2% of blacks that had economic independence. And then today, you still have only about 2% of blacks in America that have enough economic power where they're considered independent. The others are codependent on the Republicans, the Democrats, and any other special interest group that's providing money to keep them in a situation where they can pretend to be called a leader.
Wow.
That's bad news.
That's bad news, Doc. That's bad news. Now, it goes down to the real critical facts that we think we are deciding where we're going to eat this evening. And we may be trying to make that decision, but there are those that make the decision on whether you will eat this evening. It's a big difference, Doc.
I guarantee you.
It's a big difference for those who sign the front of the paycheck versus those who sign the back of the paycheck, Doc. That's a big difference.
And the worst difference is many that I know don't have a back to sign on the check because they don't get a check. Many that's qualified for checks or denied checks, and the money is available. Others have handicaps, all kind of disability, don't have the skill, the will, nor the support to even get benefits from rehab. They know they're out there, but they don't know how to get them. And we don't have enough community organizations that can get with these kind of people and call them in and say, let me get you some rehab money. Allow me an opportunity to get your child in school. Your children are good in school. About 10% of black kids, even after slavery, were excellent in school. They could get scholarships anywhere. Today, it's still about the same number, about 10%.
Wow.
And they are going to the predominantly white schools throughout America and the world, but that is gradually changing. In the next 7 years, when we get through, you're going to have more and more black kids in that 10% range, the top tier, attending black colleges and universities. Thousands and thousands of denominations going to have their own schools from pre-K to college. Some going to have graduate schools. And people don't believe it, they can't see it, but the black churches throughout the world, and we have the information right here, they collect more than $200 billion worldwide every year. There are some black preachers in Africa that are billionaires. They make $400,000 and $500,000 every Sunday, and they are independent. They are not with the major denominations. We have many in America, black preachers, that's making thousands and thousands of dollars every week, preaching, traveling all over the country and the world, selling books and tapes and all kinds of things, living in palaces, have guards and security, maids and butlers and chauffeurs, just like they're the king of the world. And they are the king in their church, in their community. Politicians call them, Republican, Democrat, all of them. And you can't make them tell you whether they are Republican or Democrat or independents. They
Wow.
put it on the Lord then, say the Lord will advise me on who I should support. And they support some with the money and others with the mouth. I know some that's doing it.
Doc, you painting a pretty dim picture, and I've always said to you that it was religion that gave us the ability to endure and escape. We never overcame, but escape the conditions that we were in from where we came, from those cotton fields and those cane fields and those swamp lands. Doc, you got to remember that, our people had to hide out down in the swamp lands just to hide from the government itself. That we had land taken from us, that we had families taken from us, that we had everything unimaginable done. And so it was religion that gave us the ability to sustain ourselves. Swing low, sweet chariot, played a tremendous role in your ability to get from that plantation to become Dr. Eldridge Henderson. Would you agree?
Partly. Now, what got me off that plantation, after 17 years of catching hell on earth, I decided silently and independently that I'm not going to be a slave much longer. And I planned when I was 8 or 9 years of age how I was going to get off that plantation. And I made it happen.
Well, Doc, you did some good planning because you got off.
That's right.
So you did that. But more of your people now are inside of these inner city ghettos, in the urban city they call, locked in by invisible fences called bypasses, like 220 and 365 and 475, things that are designed to move traffic around the black community so they don't even have to stop and shop or be bothered with it. And so we have more people going back to the plantation in that sense than there were in the beginning when you got away.
But let me tell you the bad news. A lot of my relatives and others in the community are still on that same plantation that I got off 60 years ago. They're still there, making the minimum wage. The only bad thing they have going for them in their mind is that they can't work anymore. They enjoyed that plantation because they never had a desire to get off it because they were taken care of. They had food, clothing, shelter, transportation, a nice house as they think. And they were able to get a little medical care if they needed, all on behest of the plantation owner.
Could go down to the country store.
Exactly.
And you
right.
never got out of debt. You could never get away from that condition as long as the man was keeping the books on how much you owed and when you had to pay it.
Well, that's what they love.
And what interest rates it was going to
They
be.
didn't care about no interest rate. They say, if I can get something when I need it, that's all I want. If I go to jail, I don't have to worry about serving time unless I kill a white person. I can kill all the blacks I want. And when I was a boy, you could kill a black person at a honky-tonk or a little nightclub in the country, and you'll be back on the plantation that Monday morning. Then you might serve some time Friday after work, Saturday, and they pick you up Sunday night and take you back to the plantation. During my time.
Doc,
And I'm not quite 100 years old
No,
yet.
you're not near about 100 years old, so it's very recent is what you're talking about.
That's exactly right.
Doc, we're in the Christmas season. We're getting close to the end of our program this evening. And I want to talk about the Christmas season and what it means and how black folk ought to deal with the holiday season that we are now moving into. You know, it's tradition that we buy these gifts and that we spend a lot of money and that we decorate and we do all of these things to celebrate this season. And it's tremendously important, this season is in the black community. And I was riding through the black community last night and I see all of the Christmas lights all over the house, everywhere. The trees are lit up. We are moving into a season that means a lot to African Americans. How, in your mind, should we act during this season?
We ought to act just as Frederick Douglass told the people that will act on the, I believe it's the 4th of July. We ought to ignore it. I will not spend a penny on a Christmas card or a light, no kind of decoration. I'm not going to give anybody a present and tell them to buy toys. I will tell them to buy books or buy you a mutual fund and tell them how to do it. You will not get any toys from the Henderson or anyone that I've worked with because I don't believe in it. Black kids need to get their resources together, get books, dictionaries instead of bicycles and tricycles, and learn one word a day. Learn how to read and write. Learn foreign languages, all on them iPhones that a lot of you are going to buy them, spending $600 and $700 for iPhones for 5 and 6-year-olds. Learn how to speak English, Spanish, things of that nature. That's what the parents got to do. Instead of buying them new clothes, new wigs, new phones, new toenails, all that crazy stuff, and they're talking about we're going to go on a vacation to California and spend $400 or $500. I know some planning right now to go to Atlanta, and they're going to spend about $800 a piece on shoes and other outwear. That's what they're going for. That ought to be a criminal act.
Well,
they ought to be fined for doing that kind of thing.
Does that have anything to do with the meaning of the season, the gifting that we've declared that we must do during this season? Does that have anything to do with the baby Jesus?
Not a thing. But we were taught to do that. We were taught to practice.
Who taught us that?
Well, our so-called owners, slave owners, tradition, our black preachers that were taught to teach us that. Our mothers and fathers of today have been brainwashed so until when I tell one, do not give your child a toy, we'll give you some money for a book. No, we can't do it that way.
They want a toy.
They want a toy first, book second, if they take the book. But if they don't take the book money, we talk against the toys.
We are, there's an old saying in the community that if you want to hide something from a black person, hide it in a book.
That's why I want them to have that book. They need that dictionary so they can learn a new word 7 days a week. Talk to the parents about it at the table. Talk among themselves. Talk about those words and use those words in sentences at school. That's all you have to do. That'll change a person's life in 8, 9, or 10 years.
Now we're coming to the end of our time, but there were some interesting things that happened in America that I'm trying to get the details on. But I understand that the senator from Arizona has indicated that they are going to switch parties from the Democratic Party and become an independent. Now, the balance of power in the Senate was already, questionable as to who really had the power. But with this switch, it puts the Democrats right back in the position that they were fighting so hard not to be in down there in Georgia with Warnock against Herschel Walker. And I think that if you switch parties after the election, that that's voter fraud. But no one else seems to think that.
Well, it really is, but it's not illegal. See, that's the thing you have to look at, Mr. Socrates. It's not illegal. And when you are in a position where you have millions of dollars that you're paying special interest lobbyists, their job is to come up with a way to keep the present party in power. And that's what they did. You have to find somebody that you can buy off and make a promise to and say, you change parties, I'm going to give you blank, blank, blank. I'm going to take care of your grandmother. I'm going to help your children go to the big universities, and you will be able to travel. And we'll guarantee that you will get at least 10 speeches per year at $50,000 apiece. Get away from the Republican Party. Get away from the Democrat Party. Quit coming independent, and we'll take care of you. Of course, they would deny it. I would deny it if I had that kind of stupidity. I wouldn't admit that I did it for that reason.
Well, it is interesting that most of our people that go to Washington go there poor and leave as very wealthy individuals. Most of them leave in terms of being millionaires, etc. It is very interesting how that can occur.
It's easy, very easy.
Well, how is it so easy? Now?
I know from what I have advised people to do. I used to be a consultant years ago, political consultant. I say, you find the people with the money, support them. We used to call them special interest groups years ago. You help them, and they will help you. Matter of fact, you don't have to be smart. They will even draft the legislation for you. They have aides with degrees from Harvard, Yale, Princeton. They'll take care of you. And tell them you want an apartment building in California. You want an apartment in Florida. On and on and on. You want some land in Arizona. They'll make it happen for you. But they don't talk about that. Most will deny this. And I don't blame them.
Most of the time is spent on low-level crimes, and 90% of our prison population is African American in Mississippi, and for some charge of 3 or 4 ounces of marijuana or something less than murder, aggravated assault, or armed robbery. And so, it's just a shame how the little person is forced to commit small crimes and serve large time.
I'm going to give you an example. Just Thursday, I knew from time to time we talk about this kind of thing. I decided to go to court just to sit in. I do that from time to time. There were 14 people in court, one white male, the others were black, and all of them had to pay fines for various things. And some had already been in contempt of court, and the judge would smile and say, I ought to have you arrested right now. But if you promise me you can bring $500 or $800 or $1,000 next Thursday, I'll give you a chance. Can you do it? Yes, I can. They walk out.
That's called the sinners with restitution provisions.
South going right.
And that's an entrapment again.
So you owe $500 today, can't pay that, come back next Thursday, owe $1,000, plus interest, plus a penalty, and court costs.
And back to jail you go.
That's right.
Doc, we're coming to the end of our program. You've been watching Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting from Jackson, Mississippi. Now, this program is being seen all over the world on Facebook. You can go to Facebook and watch us there. And when you do, share the program with your friends and family. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, hit the donate button. We need your resources to help this program go forward. This is Socrates Garrett and my co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, signing off for the evening, and have a great and wonderful weekend. Good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services, and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South